Hi, all. I'm Professor Tina Good, and I'm here today to recap what we talked about in our Zoom session last week when we were talking about Taming of the Shrew. I know many of you were not able to attend, and so I just wanted to touch base on some of the important things beyond the quiz that should come up when we're thinking about Taming of the Shrew. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And by watching this video, you should easily be able to take the quiz that I've posted regarding the Taming of the Shrew video and PowerPoint. Okay? All right. So the first thing that I want us to think about whenever we're talking about Shakespeare is to pay attention to the title of the play. Okay, so the first thing we're going to notice is we're going to notice that this is not a tragedy because it does not say it's the tragedy of Hamlet or the tragedy of Othello, right? All tragedies would say that it was a tragedy, right? We can tell that it's not going to be a history because it's not named. It's not named, you know, Antony and Cleopatra. It's not named Julius Caesar, not named Richard III. It's not named any of the Henrys, right? So we know it's not going to be a history play, right? And so that leaves us with it's either a comedy or it's a romance, which is really a derivative of a comedy with some fantasy thrown in, right? So when we look at Taming of the Shrew, we know from the title it's not going to be a tragedy, not going to be a history, likely a comedy, which means that there should be a wedding at the end of the play, and that wedding should be of four of our main characters who have struggled, right, to come together, and finally it ends, with this happy ending of a wedding, right? And so when we're walking into Taming of the Shrew, right, we would immediately think like, okay, so it's this woman, right? Some woman who's perceived as a difficult woman, is going to go through a taming process, probably by a man who is trying to wed her, right? And then that's going to end the play as a happy ending where she falls in love with him, he's in love with her, and they get married and live happily ever after. Right now, of course, that's not exactly what happened in this play, but if you were just walking in and you saw that title, that's what you would begin to think about, to expect if you were watching this play, right? And so the first question, because the shrew is not named, right? The first question we would ask is like, who is the shrew, right? And of course, the common interpretation is that the shrew is Katharina, right? She appears to be our main character. She appears to be our protagonist. She appears to be the one that, society would suggest needs taming, right? And we could talk about that in a second. But is it Katharina? Now, we have to think about that because Katharina is married in Act 3, right? So she and Petruchio are married in Act 3 and not at the end, right? It's Bianca and the widow that are married at the end. So is it Katharina, right? Or are the laws of the comedy, right, being bent a bit by Shakespeare? There's also a line that the servants deliver in the play after, they are fed up with the way that Petruchio is treating Katharina. And so they call him a shrew, right? So it would be gender bending, right? A shrew is generally used to refer to a woman, but Petruchio, the servants, describe him as a shrew, So has he become the shrew, right? Is he out of place? Is he not, yielding to what society expects from him, right? Is he being difficult? Or is it Bianca, right? Bianca is the one who gets married at the end, right? And much of the play is about the courting of Bianca, of course. So is it Bianca that is the shrew? Is it someone else That is the shrew. So because Shakespeare, sort of messes with this idea of the main character getting married in the third act and not really giving the shrew a name, it allows us to ask these kinds of questions, right? And depending on how you answer it, we get different understandings of the play. Okay. Now, as I said, most people believe that it is the shrew, that Katharina is the shrew, and that they do, get married at the end, and or that they at least are happy in the end, even though they are married in Act 3. Their happy ending does come in the end. It's generally what is perceived as the ending, and that is because of the monologue that Katharina delivers at the wedding. So the thing is, we got to think about is like, can we trust what is being given to us in the play, right? Can we trust any of it? Because the themes of illusion and deception are prevalent throughout, right? Um, they're all pretending to be someone else in order to woo Bianca, or in order to get Baptista's money, or get their father's money. There's all this deception and illusion going on, right? So what can we really know about the characters when we know that there's all of this illusion and deception going on? Are we as audience members also being deceived, right? Are we being brought into that deception? Well, let's look. Okay. In a very, unusual move, this play actually has what we call an induction, right? And it's an induction that's sort of introducing the play. It would be, sort of like, it's like setting up the play, if you will, right? And it's interesting because what we see in the induction, right, is the Lord finds this peasant Sly who's drunk, and they decide to trick him into thinking that he's a lord, and then they sit down and they watch this play, right? And so the play then is the Taming of the Shrew. Okay, so why would they have this there? Well, one of the things we have to know about Renaissance theaters is that the peasants really had the best seats in the theater. They really weren't seats, however, they were sort of a pit where all of the peasants were able to go and watch the play. The plays were very, very cheap, and they were sort of a day festival that culminated in the play. And up until then, there might be cockfighting, there might be bear brawling, lots of drinking, lots of carousing. So this would have been like a very big kind of like fair kind of thing. And so when the play starts, one of the things that they have to do is they need to quiet down, right? This rowdy bunch that's in the front. Because remember, they have no microphones, there's no sound system, there's no lighting system, right? So they've got to calm them down so that the merchant class and the lords and perhaps even the queen can hear them above the peasants. So one thing that they would do is they would make it very interesting for the peasants, right? So the peasants would be engaged in it, right? So they would have this drunk guy, and then he becomes this lord, right? Pretends to be a lord. But what's so interesting about that is what Shakespeare does in creating this opening scene is that Sly now is being deceived, right? And so we immediately start getting that idea of illusion and deception, right? But also how well Sly transitions into being this lord, right? He actually kind of becomes the lord. And we know that by looking at the language. If you look at your books, you'll see like Sly is usually, when we first see him, speaking in prose. Right? That is what the peasants or the servants in Shakespeare usually speak in prose, whereas the upper class usually speak in poetic verse, or what we would call iambic pentameter. And when Sly becomes the Lord, the language shifts and he adopts the poetic verse, right? Showing how easy it is then for servants of that class, right, to become upper class. This is very big, right, in England, and even now this would be a big thing. But that is was economic. This is not economic class. This is the class that you were born into, and there was no transcending the class that you were born into at this time, right? If you were born into the merchant class, you were a merchant. If you were born into the aristocracy, you were an aristocracy. It had nothing to do with the amount of money that you made or what you were born into. Yes, the merchant class did allow for some transition between the classes, but very, very little. And so what this shows sort of subversively is that it has nothing to do with what you're born into, that people can, transcend those classes and the boundaries that are there. But what's most interesting, I think, beyond the blurring of class lines, is that by setting up Sly to now watch this play called The Taming of the Shrew, so now Sly is a part of us. Sly is an audience, thereby making Taming of the Shrew, right, a play within a play, right? And if you watched Hamlet, you saw that there was a play within the play. And this is a very big thing in Shakespeare's play, in Shakespeare's plays. Why? Why is the play within the play there? Well, number one, remember, there's all of these people there. There's no sound system. So we're going to see a lot of redundancy in Shakespeare's plays. Just in case you missed it here, it's going to show up over here so that the audience gets multiple occasions to understand what's going on, right? You're going to have these moments where things are being explained to the audience. This is what just happened, right? So that, if the audience misses something here, they have another opportunity to get it. And the play within the play is exactly for the purpose of making something clear to the audience of what is going on, right, in the play, making clarity. I want you to understand this plot point, right? So the play within Hamlet showed the death of his father and that he was murdered by his uncle, right? And so that made very clear that was what was going, that was the crux of the Hamlet play, right? So what is the thing that the play within the play, that the Taming of the Shrew, right, then is making clear to Sly or to us as an audience member? Given that illusion is a theme, what is this play trying to make clear to us? Okay. Notice that the title says The Taming of the Shrew. It doesn't call it The Tamed Shrew, but The Taming of. So this gives rise to a lot of, what does it mean, this idea of taming? And if you watch the documentary with Meryl Streep that I asked you to watch, you'll see that for those actors, they believed that taming had a lot to do with the act of falling in love, right? And that when uh, uh, Katharina falls in love with Petruchio, she's therefore tamed, right? And they have this happy ending. And Petruchio could also possibly be argued, because the actors certainly do argue this, that because Petruchio actually falls in love with Katharina because they're sort of like mirrors of each other, and that they're sort of equal and they can kind of take each other on, right? That passion makes them fall in love with each other, and therefore they are tamed by the end. So is loving taming, right? Is that what love does? It tames us, right? Maybe. If we think about that, then maybe we're happy with the happy ending at when Kate delivers her monologue. But I think that we have to make sure that we don't ignore the sheer torture that Petruchio puts Katharina through, right? It happens off stage. It's explained to us by the servants. We do get some of it when he's being starved, and the way that he treats her at the wedding and whatnot. But there's real torture going on there. So if you believe that in fact Kate is tamed by the end of the play, is it because she's been tortured into being submissive, right? It's a very different interpretation than them falling in love, right? In which case, if you think that it's through the torture that she is tamed, that she's become submissive, right? Is it then a happy ending? One of the things that we have to really think about in Shakespeare's plays is this difference between a monologue and a soliloquy, right? The soliloquy you saw in Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question, right? And that is Hamlet, sort of making his thoughts clear to the audience. This is what I'm thinking right now. And it should be considered as truthful. Like, this is what his thoughts really are. And he's breaking that fourth wall and he's telling the audience, this is what I'm thinking right now, right? The monologue, however, is a speech that is delivered to an audience that is on stage or to us as the audience, right? So at the end, Katharina is delivering a speech to the wedding party, right? And she's telling them, you should obey your husbands, you should do whatever they want, they work hard, et cetera, and that she, loves Petruchio. And so she is seeking to persuade them, right, of what she wants them to think. Does she really think this thing? We don't know, right? Because a monologue doesn't necessarily have to be truthful. It's not really maybe a truthful reflection of what the character, is thinking. It could be something that they want that wedding party to think, that they're persuading them to think this, right? May or may not be truthful. So then we have to think like, okay, so is this monologue that Kate delivers at the end, is it truthful? Does she really believe these things? Does she really think that Bianca and the widow should follow these dictates that she's espousing, showing that she's tamed, right? Or is there another reason for this, right? What other motivations for Katharina could she have to make this speech that seems so over the top and so out of character for her? Like, what could be another reason for her to make this speech, right? And she's making it specifically to Bianca and the widow, but specifically, I think we have to know that there's a sister rivalry, and she's coming in as the older sister, saying to her younger sister who's just been married, this is how you should treat your husband. So if we think about it, could it be revenge, right? Is Katharina pretending to be tamed, right? So that she could get revenge on Bianca, right? Because Bianca is not obeying her husband at this point. The widow is not obeying her husband. Only Katharina appears to be obeying her husband, right? So if we take a look back at Act 2, Scene 1, we see that Katharina and Bianca are in fist fights, right? They're just fighting it out. And especially Katharina is being very, very mean to Bianca. So much so that she strikes her, right? And one of the reasons why, she's so upset is that, Baptista has declared that Bianca, the favorite, cannot marry until Katharina marries, right? And so Bianca's very upset because she wants to get married and Katharina does not want to get married. And so they're fighting over this, and Katharina strikes Bianca, and her father, Baptista, walks in, and she said, and he very much makes it clear that Bianca, right, is his favorite. And he says, why are you beating her? She didn't say anything. And Katharina says, her silence flouts me, right? And I'll be revenged. Her silence flouts me, and I'll be revenged, right? Instead of speaking up for Katharina, Bianca goes along with it. And Baptista says, what in my sight, Bianca, get thee in. Get out of here, Bianca. And Katharina says, what, will you not suffer me? Nay, now I see she is your treasure. And she says to her father, I know, my sister is your treasure. She must have a husband. I must dance barefoot on her wedding day, and for your love to her lead apes in hell, right? I must get married to apes in hell so that she can get married. Talk not to me. I will go sit and weep till I can find occasion of revenge. Is that what not the play she's done? Sat and wept until she could find occasion of revenge, right? Remember, she has got quite a bit of wealth now that she's married Petruchio. She's, it seems, learned how to manage him, right? So she is in a pretty good situation as it goes for women at that time, right? If she can manage Petruchio, if she can pretend to do what he wants and he loves her, then she has quite a bit of wealth coming her way, right? Bianca is ignoring this, and Bianca is in not nearly as good a shape, right, as is Katharina. So is that what's happening? I don't know. There's a lot of ways to interpret it depending on how it's performed. Should it be a happy ending? Do you believe it? Or is there something darker that's going on in that ending? Remember, we did have that torture. One thing to pay attention to, this is our last point, is that Shakespeare's plays always, 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 no matter where they're set, they always relate back to England in Renaissance times. Okay. And so, especially the Queen, right? Now, the British Renaissance is a little late. It follows the Italian Renaissance. The Italian Renaissance really focused more on art, right? You guys know all the art that comes out of the Italian Renaissance. But the British Renaissance, Queen Elizabeth specifically, really focused on poetry and on plays. The Italian Renaissance also focused on poetry, and they did have some theater, but not at all to what compared to what came out of the British Renaissance, right? Shakespeare specifically, while his plays are subversive, right? We saw this sort of gender bending and this class bending, right? His plays do seem to be supportive of the Queen, right? Remember, in this very, very, male dominant time, right, where women have their place, women are property of their husbands, women are subordinate, women are not citizens, they have a woman ruler, right? And this is causing a great paradox for this society, right? And so the Queen, as we know, the Queen Elizabeth never does get married, but she does court, right? A lot of leaders, a lot of kings, but she never marries, right? And so if we think about it, the Queen is not acting her role as a woman, right? She is the Queen. Could the Queen be the Shrew? And if so, what is the message? What is the message to the Queen? Or what is the message about the Queen? Right? And one might suggest that perhaps she should marry and be tamed and get a good king to help her rule the country and give up her power and get a good king. Maybe it would be unlike Shakespeare to do that about a queen, but it could be, right? Could be. Or maybe, right, the message is don't get married. Don't give up your power, right? Be the shrew. Do not be tamed. If you marry, this is what you can look forward to, right? So this, I just want to make that connection back for you, back to Renaissance time. So we always remember that plays are contextualized within a certain period, within a certain political system, and that Shakespeare's plays are very much imbued within that political system, while, of course, remaining timeless for us to get, value out of them, even in the 21st century. Okay, so I hope that this video was useful for you. Please go and take the quiz right now after you've watched this video, and I will follow up with another video after we have our next Zoom session. Have a good day.